All right. Well, tonight, let's see. I want to take a look at timekeepers. And this is a brand new area for me and something that I was just thinking about. And I'm not sure whether or not uh, there's enough information here to conclude, although I would like to offer a conclusion, but certainly um, that would be my understanding of what these verses are teaching for now. And and I'd like to be able to find additional verses that would perhaps support that. Now, looking at timekeepers, what I mean by that is, we begin to see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, right, where God established the timekeepers in the heavens. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, for days and years." Now, by God's grace, I think one of the things that we have to begin to look for as we study the Bible is to try to pick up similar language throughout the rest of the Bible. And then, because God can phrase it or word it a little bit differently, but really He has the same thing in view. And I have found this to be so in other studies that we've looked at. Now, when we look at Genesis chapter 1, we begin to see that the timekeepers there spiritually, right, is really focusing or pointing to the lights of the world, right, the churches and congregations that God would later on establish um, in the Bible. Now, in verse 16, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, right? Verse 18. And to divide the light from the darkness. Now we know that this took place literally, right? No question about that. I don't think anyone here would object that this actually happened. And so that was the beginning of the universe, the beginning of time, right? At least the beginning of planet Earth that God would purpose for it. Now, and then we know spiritually, right, from reading the rest of the Bible, God there begins to talk about the division, right, the separation of the wheat from the tares, separating the light from the darkness. And so we see that the timekeepers, and we're going to see, I'm going to share some other verses here. We begin to see that the timekeepers, spiritually, they were pointing to those in the churches and congregations, right? Talking about the corporate body. Psalm 104, verse 19, He appointed the moon for seasons, the sun knoweth his going down, right? On the surface, again, it appears to be talking about something literal. But we're going to see from looking at some other verses that how we can begin to pick up the spiritual picture that God has in view. Now, you know what's interesting, and I'm also looking for feedback on this correction, right? If anyone can offer any. Galatians chapter 4, verse 10. I find it very interesting. God talks about observing days, months, times, and years. Now, in the context, I believe we'll see that the reference would be to the carnal ordinances, right? The feast days that were established. Matter of fact, I think I mentioned one time when God gave us a calendar. It appears that God instituted the days, the nights, the feast days, the ceremonial laws, and they had to be fulfilled at very specific times, right? Very specific time of year. We know the high priest was to go into the Holy of Holies once every year. And so we begin to see that at least there's a reason, right, for God giving us the calendar. so that these feast days, matter of fact, I believe in the book of Leviticus, God speaks of 3 times in a year they were supposed to come and present an offering, right? And one of those is the Feast of Tabernacles. Now we know, right, that the Feast of Tabernacles spiritually, although many people are looking, or there are those that are looking for the literal fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles, we know when we start looking at the language in Zechariah chapter 14 that spiritually the Feast of Tabernacles is actually being fulfilled today, right? It has to do with going up to the mountains. And we know that when you see the abomination of desolation, that the believers are to flee to the mountains. And so that's spiritual, and that is taking place today. And God has a lot to say about that. Now, when we look at Galatians chapter 4, verse 10, I'm wondering if God there is talking about observing the carnal ordinances, but who actually, who is in charge? Genevieve, welcome. Who is really the object of worship when it comes to the days, the months, the times, and years? Take a look at, let's see, we read in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19, unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them. Now this, I believe, God is talking about those in the churches and congregations. They began to worship the sun, moon, and stars. They're worshiping the timekeepers, right? They are worshiping the timekeepers rather than actually focusing on Christ. And by God's grace, I think we see a lot of that going on today. Yes, exactly. They're worshiping themselves. They're worshiping themselves. God has allowed the locusts to come against the land, and God is bringing judgment to the corporate body. And so, and this is one reason why he actually begins to destroy the corporate body. And as he does, he talks about the sun, the moon, and the stars being darkened, where there is no light. Now, that's very interesting, right? And I think we're going to see quite a few verses where, if we look at it very, very carefully, we do see how God is relating to the whole idea of timekeeping. Now, in Revelation chapter 9, verse 15, here's another verse that I find very interesting. Remember the common denominator I said before? We start looking for patterns. Yes. Right, Christ departed and then he hides his face. That, I believe, began to take place at the start of the Great Tribulation, right? And then the command goes to come out from my people. God begins to bring revelation to the body, to the believers. Now, again, take a look at Revelation chapter 9, verse 15. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the 3rd part of men. Question: who is the 3rd part? Again, by God's grace, I think we've looked at, even in this room and some other studies that we've looked at in the past, I have come to understand the 3rd part is no different than the way God instituted it back there, I believe, in, was it Ezekiel? I'm sorry, I forget the exact reference, but when God talks about the 2 parts, and all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd shall remain, and I will bring the 3rd part through the fire. Yes, the 3rd part, I really believe it is talking about the believers. Now, one thing we have to try and pick up and be very careful when we read a lot of this language, we have to also consider the time factor, right? Because when God talks about sorrow, and then after the sorrow comes joy, it identifies with some aspect of the tribulation. Prior to the joy, prior to the depart out, the believers had sorrow, right? And that's the third part, being chastised. That is God allowing the believers to be altogether identified with the corporate body, right? Because as Arlie pointed out before, God is hiding his face from the body. There's no revelation, right? The book was sealed until the time of the end. So there had to come the time when God would actually begin to reveal the nature of judgment. So, who is the third part that is being slain here? Well, I believe that's just another way that God is telling us of the killing of the two witnesses. And I think I can prove that, and I'll just maybe just look at one verse. That's not the object of the study, so I don't want to get too deep into it. We read, for example, in Daniel chapter 11, verse 33, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword." Right? They shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. And if we continue to look a little bit deeper, we'll see that it has to do with the mouth of the false prophets. It is because the false prophets are bringing lies. They're bringing a deceitful gospel. And not that the believers, that they lose their salvation, but rather they are subject. They are hearing it, being a part of the corporate body. But then there had to come a time when God would begin to bring revelation. He would begin to instruct the people so that they would come out of Babylon, right? So I believe the third part there is talking about the killing of the two witnesses. And if you want, perhaps, Lord willing, one other piece of evidence, try to compare the language. We also read about the third part in Revelation chapter 8. When you have some time, maybe take a look at Revelation chapter 8 and compare that to Revelation chapter 16. And I think you'll see that pretty much the same language is in view, with the exception of the third part. So on the one hand, Revelation chapter 8 would be focusing on the part out. It would be focusing on the death of the two witnesses, whereas Revelation chapter 16 would be judgment. It would be identified with the time of the depart out. All right, well, with that said, let me, that was just a slight detour. Let's continue looking at the timekeepers, the lights in the heavens, symbolic of those in the churches and congregations. Now, we know that the physical sun, moon, and stars cannot praise God, right? Yet we read about the sun, the moon, and the stars in Genesis chapter 15. I'm sorry, Genesis chapter 1. And here God is talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars praising God, right? So we know that God speaks in parables. God speaks in parables. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, we read, "Ye are the light of the world," right? Ye are the light of the world. So we begin to suspect that God is using the sun, moon, and stars symbolically to represent those in the churches and congregations, right? The light bearers. Genesis chapter 37, verse 9, regarding Joseph's dream, "And he dreamed yet another dream, told it to his brethren. And I said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." What is that talking about? Who can tell me, just looking at the context and who Joseph would typify, right? Would it be the time when God brings back the captivity of his people? And now the sun, moon, and the stars, right? The corporate body, the unsaved body, they come and bow down. Now they are worshiping the believers, right? Wouldn't that make sense? At least that's the way that I'm looking at that verse at the moment. Now, again, I'm posting Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19, and we see the whole object of worship. Those who worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, having to do with those in the corporate body. Okay, let's take a quick look at Old Jerusalem. And this is one reason, you know, one reason I mentioned in the past, or at least I questioned the idea, is God still on the calendar? That is he officially keeping time? Now, as I said before, this study is just to introduce this observation, and Lord willing, I'm sure we'll be talking about this some more. But this is just to introduce the observation that the timekeepers, the sun, moon, and stars, they were instituted by God to regulate the passage of time, not literal time, right? Because now we begin to see that God speaks of the sun, the moon, and the stars being darkened in connection with what? The depart out, as God brings judgment to the churches and congregations. That's the time when the celestial bodies are no longer giving light, right? Because God is finished with earthly Jerusalem. We read here in verse 13 of Joshua chapter 10, and the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Now we're going to see later on, God has a lot to say about the sun, the moon, and the stars, again being darkened in connection with Judgment Day, right? Amos chapter 8, verse 9, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in a clear day. Keep an eye on the pattern, the language of the sun, the moon, and the stars not giving their lights. Remember, they are the timekeepers. Micah chapter 3, verse 6, therefore night shall be unto you, that ye shall not have a vision, and it shall be dark unto you, ye shall not divine, and the sun shall go down over the prophets, and the day shall be dark over them. It is the day of the Lord. That's Judgment Day, as God is allowing the timekeepers to come out of commission, right? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Be ye angry and sin not. Now, you know, I never really understood what this verse was really talking about, because I think by God's grace we've come to realize that a lot of verses that we read on the surface before, and then we have the tendency of applying them to ourselves as individuals, right? But now it begins to make sense. Be ye angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Now we know the sun going down brings darkness, right, in the land, and that appears to be another way that God is really telling us, do not allow yourselves to come into the great tribulation, that is Judgment Day, right, as God is bringing darkness in the land. Ecclesiastes 12:2, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. Isaiah 13:10, for the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. That's Judgment Day, right? The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. Now here is the sticking verse, I think. You know, when we start looking at Matthew chapter 24, and this, by God's grace, I think was a real turning point in understanding the timing of the tribulation. Matthew 24:29, and I'm pretty sure many people today, you know, they look at Matthew 24 and they relate that to May 21, or the very last day. But you see, when we start looking at the pattern and the language that God is using, we understand that this is talking about judgment coming on the timekeepers, right? Now, Matthew 24:29 begins to make sense. The tribulation has come to an end at the time when God began to bring judgment to the corporate body, and at the same time commands the believers to come out of Babylon, right? Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. Now again, we start looking at all the language that God is using in connection to the sun, the moon, and the stars. We know that it identifies with the timekeepers. Now the purpose of this study, or at least what I'd like to try and get across and raise the question, is it possible? Is it possible that with the timekeepers being removed, right, does this also mean that God is not or no longer officially on the calendar? Now, I still have to try and find additional verses that would confirm that. I don't think it's going to be an easy task, but at least it's something, you know, as Bereans, we should not even hesitate to maybe even raise the question. And if we can find biblical support for it, well, then fine. That's what we want to share, right? If we can't, well, then we go back to the drawing board, and then we continue to study the Bible by God's grace. So Luke 21, verse 25, and there shall be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and upon the earth the stress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Now, remember what I said earlier, is that God appears to have a way of really giving us the exact same information, but then he modifies the language, right? He modifies the language. Let me give you a quick example. You know, when we talk about an earthquake, and God says that, what do we read about the earthquake? I think it's in Revelation chapter 6, right? And this is just a slight illustration, Lord willing. Hang on a second. We read about the earthquake in Revelation chapter 6. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry. Revelation chapter 16, verse 18. Revelation 16, verse 18. Now take a look at the language here very carefully. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. Now, you know, unfortunately, a lot of times we read this and the focus is only on what? On the earthquake, right? But everything else is very, very important, because the latter part of this verse, I believe, is a time reference. It is a time reference, such as was not since men were upon the earth. What do we read about great tribulation? We read in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So can you see how God is tying in the earthquake to the tribulation, right? It identifies with the tribulation. There are a couple of other verses where we see the same thing, and then today, as I was listening to the some Bible reading there, I picked up a verse in the book of Joel. In the book of Joel, let's see if I can find that. Joel chapter 1. Now notice what I was trying to say before is that how God is going to give us the same picture, right? But then he modifies the language. Let's see. I have to go back to verse 1. Joel chapter 1. The word of the Lord that came to Joel the son of Pethuel. Hear this, ye old men, and give ear, all ye inhabitants of the land. Have this been in your days? You see that? Hath this been in your days, or even in the days of your fathers? Now, I'm not sure if you see the connection there, but I definitely see it, right? Because there again, God is talking about a time like no other, right? A time like no other. And it identifies with the earthquake, it identifies with the tribulation. it identifies with the locust, right? Because the whole context, I believe, in the beginning chapters of the book of Joel, God is talking about the locust, the cankerworm, the caterpillars, and so on, the insects that God allows to come into the vineyard, right, to destroy the vineyard. And that's God removing the light of the gospel from the corporate body. And the whole idea of the sun, moon, and stars being darkened, that's just another way that God uses to demonstrate that, right? Okay, so that's the point that I was trying to make here, is that we have to look at a lot of verses in the Bible, and then in doing so, Lord willing, we begin to pick up a pattern, right? Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 7. When I shall put thee out, I will cover the heaven, and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. See that? Now take a look at Revelation chapter 10, verse 6. And swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things that therein are, that there should be time no longer. That's an interesting verse. That's an interesting reference, that there should be time no longer. Well, what did we read in Genesis chapter 1 earlier? God used the sun, the moon, and the stars to give light upon the earth, right? And they began to mark time, literally. But then we see, right, in looking at the rest of the Bible, God is using them spiritually as the timekeepers. And now God is bringing judgment to Babylon, and he also speaks of it. That's one verse. Let's see. We read in Revelation chapter 2, verse 21. And I gave her space, and it's talking about Babylon, right? I gave her space to repent of her fornication. Let me just make sure. Verse 20, notwithstanding, notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. So that's just another picture, really, of the beast of Babylon, right? As God is bringing judgment to the corporate body. But notice here again, God says that I gave her space, and that's time. I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. And then we began to read about that time is no longer. Is it possible that God is saying spiritually, the believers have, at the time of the depart out, they have come into eternity. And if they've come into eternity, well, there's a possibility there also that God is no longer concerned with what? That he's no longer concerned with time. Now, earlier today I was looking at some numbers comparing the events of the Old Testament to 1994 as well as the year 2011. There are a lot of passages and time paths that are focusing on both 1994 and 2011, right? And if anyone is interested, maybe I can even put it, Lord willing, on the Berean Studies page. And it's really to take a look at a pattern, right, between the 2 years. Now, we know 1994 turned out to be spiritual, and it's not really surprising, right? It turned out to be spiritual. Now, when we start looking at all these verses that God is sharing with us here in the Bible, is there a possibility that 2011 might also be spiritual, in the sense that they have become shadows, or they typify the events that are taking place today? And that's one reason, especially the verse we read in Matthew chapter 24, when we begin to see that the sun, moon, and stars being darkened, having to do with God bringing judgment to the corporate body. This, at least for me anyway, this changes how we interpret the Bible in connection with 2011. Now, I still hold, I'm one of these people that when I talk about 2011, I do see that there's a lot of patterns and references, and there has to be a reason why God put them in the Bible. One reason is, that it could also serve as a test, especially if all the attention is on the 5 months and we're not really studying the Bible carefully. And the other possibility is that, well, perhaps God could bring the world to an end in 2011, right? But I think what's really important for us as Bereans, Lord willing, is to try and stay with the Bible. Stay with the Bible. Let the Bible define the Bible, right? Let the Bible interpret the Bible. And by God's grace, when we do that, we begin to see more and more truth. And then there we have assurance that of what God is really talking about. All right. Don't have too far to go. Okay, now I wanted to start looking at New Jerusalem. Now we saw that insofar as the timekeepers, God is looking at those in the churches and congregations, and then now he talks about the timekeepers being removed, right, out of commission. And then we ask the next question, well, is God concerned with time and the new heavens and the new earth, right, at the time of the depart out? The believers now, they inherit because God is gathering. He is gathering the elect, right, unto Christ. Now in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 20, thy sun shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself, for the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the days of thy mourning shall be ended. So in other words, there is no more tribulation for the believers. Today they have joy. Remember, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Luke chapter 1, verse 78. Though the tender mercy of our God, whereby the day spring from on high, have visited us, to give light to them that sit in darkness, and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. The way of peace is none other than the Lord Jesus Christ, right? And so the believers, they come out of darkness. And that was anticipated by Genesis chapter 1, when God separated the light from the darkness. And that's what's happening today, right? And by God's mercy, as he reveals this information, he is providing salvation. He is bringing his people out of tribulation. He is bringing back the captivity of his people. And these are the things, I believe, that were hidden unto this time. Micah chapter 7, verse 8, rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. And the idea of rising, again, it points to the depart out, right? It is a resurrection. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. The Lord shall be a light unto me. Okay, couple of verses here. I know I took a detour, and I'm trying to keep this study as short as possible. Just want to look at a few verses here that talking about the end of the world. And I believe, again, in this context, the end of the world has to do with the end of the church age. Now, it's possible, and I think we're going to see some verses here where God could also, in talking about the end of the world, he's also talking about the last day. Although the verses themselves, right, of the separation and the depart out, those verses are focusing on the separation of the light from the darkness. But God does have in view, I believe, at this time, when he speaks of the end of the world, the main focus really is on the destruction of the corporate body. But it has to culminate with the very last day, right? At least that's the way I'm understanding it for now. Now, Matthew chapter 13, verse 39, the enemy that sowed them is the devil, the harvest is the end of the world, right? And the reapers are the angels. Now, many people look at this again, and they think that, or they're really looking at the end of the world as the very last day, when in actuality, the end of the world is already here, right? Has to do with the day and the hour, God bringing judgment to the body. Matthew 13:49. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angel shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just. The end of the world, again, it's talking about today. And that's the time when the timekeepers are taken out of commission. Matthew 24:22. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. A very, very significant, Lord willing, I think. And I'm going to share with you why. Matthew 24:22. You know, today we tend to look at the shortening of the days as God instituting the latter rain, but we think of the latter rain as God saving a multitude of people at this time. Now, the saving, and I think I began to talk about this a little bit before, but I don't think I got a chance to finish. The salvation that God has in view there, I believe, is the depart out. It has to do with the elect, first of all, coming into the Great Tribulation, the killing of the two witnesses, and then there is salvation. So unless God had actually shortened the days, and again, you know, we have to raise the question, is the shortening of the days also telling us that God is no longer concerned with time? Is he still concerned with time? Revelation chapter 11, verse 9. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. What is that talking about? Isn't that, first of all, talking about the killing of the two witnesses, right? The killing of the two witnesses. What does it mean that now the sun, moon, and stars, that is those that are dwelling upon the earth, the unsaved, in the churches and congregations, they do not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves? What does that mean? Well, again, you know, if we look at the spiritual language behind graves and burial, it's really talking about salvation, right? In other words, there is no salvation. As long as the two witnesses are killed, there is no depart out. God is not saving the body. Does that make sense? And that's the salvation that is in view there, I believe. Again, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. So in other words, unless God had put an end to the tribulation, he would not be bringing about, right, the captivity of his people. And the captivity of his people, the fact that God is allowing them to come out of tribulation, that is salvation. And as long as the two witnesses were killed, their dead bodies are not finding the grave, right? They're not finding salvation. Okay, Isaiah 45:17. But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation. He shall not be ashamed. You see that? Those that are not ashamed are the ones that are coming out of tribulation. It's not talking about the 5 months, 5 literal months, where we talk about bones being scattered and to be shamed of God. We have to understand that spiritually. Okay, now I just want to share this last piece of information here, and then I'll go ahead and conclude, and then we can open up for a conversation. Now, you know, a lot of times when I look at some of these verses, I have said in the past that from everything that I can see in the Bible, when God is talking about the end of the world, right, the focus is pretty much always on the death of the church, the end of the corporate body. But there are two verses that are a little bit puzzling to me right now. First of all, we read in Matthew chapter 24, verse 13. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Now that salvation there, I believe, is the same as the one that I just mentioned, that we read here in Matthew 24, verse 22. Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, right? And that's the same salvation. So the end, in looking at this context, again, has to be a reference to the death of the church. Now, in verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now, I'm not going to do this right now, but we really have to go back and look at the whole context of Matthew chapter 24 to see whether there God is talking about pre-depart out or post-tribulation. Okay? And the reason I say this is because of this verse right here. Read in Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. You see the similarity between these two verses? Whereas I believe in Revelation chapter 14, the context there will establish that this is at the time of the depart out. And so the believers, God's people, they are bringing the everlasting gospel. And that may have a direct tie into Matthew 24, verse 14. And that's something, Lord willing, I'll have to continue to look at. And if that's the case, then sometimes, depending on the context, when God there is talking about the end, whereas most times I see that it's really focusing on the death of the church, but there's a possibility that depending on the context, God could be referring to the very last day. Although he does not tell us when that last day is, unless we're looking at the patterns that we see on the calendar. Okay, let's see. And then just to follow up on Revelation chapter 14, verse 7, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. So we know Revelation 14 is verses 6 and 7 is talking about post-tribulation. So that establishes the everlasting gospel that is being sent into the that is being proclaimed today. And as I said, that might tie in also to Matthew chapter 24. But Lord willing, we can take a look at it some other time. All right. You know what? I'm going to hold off on the conclusion, as I said, because this study is really offering some verses for consideration. And if I do find additional verses, and Lord willing, we can maybe come back together again and try to add to this information right here. Or if God will bring about correction, then certainly we want to try to work that out also. Try to factor that into the verses that we're looking at here. All right, hang on a second.